and pass the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act to right our fiscal ship. At the same time, we give the President the borrowing authority he so desires. The United States Senate should follow suit and pass the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act immediately. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
I ask to speak as if in morning business. Unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today because we are discussing the cut and the cap and the Balance Act, which, of course, I support. And it gets back to a little poster that I've had at home with my kids over the years. And I have a copy of it here. It's called the two-penny difference. The two-penny difference is 2 cents. It says if you earn $1 and you spend 99 cents, you're okay. But spend $1 and you're heading for trouble. Yet today this says, and this has been many, many years ago, yet today spending seems more fashionable than saving. What once was called poor money management has now been called deficit spending. Whatever it's called, it leads to inevitable headaches for people, for companies, and even for governments. And frankly, Mr. President, that's the situation with which we find ourselves today. A major headache because, as a nation, we have continued to spend money that we don't have. And as a result of that, we've been borrowing money, significant amounts of money, actually about $4 billion a day. A lot of it we're borrowing from overseas, much of it from China. And you say, how does one then become or maintain themselves as an independent and strong and forceful nation when one owes that sort of a debt to someone else? So what the American people have been telling me as I've traveled around my home state is that Americans believe, and the people of Wyoming clearly believe, that they want Washington to cut spending, not to increase taxes. Now the White House doesn't seem to hear that message. They're ignoring it. They're tuning it out. They've admitted they don't have a plan to cut Washington wasteful spending, and actually the President doesn't think he needs one. I want to quote the White House press secretary. He said, leadership, he said, is not proposing a plan. You know, it's saddening, but it's not surprising, given this White House's track record of changing its positions over and over. Say one thing, do another, and no one can really predict what they will do. Just last week, the President said he wouldn't support a short-term increase in the debt ceiling. He even warned the House Majority Leader. He said, don't call my bluff. We've all seen it on television. Now we know it was a bluff. The President is now saying he might welcome a short-term increase in the debt ceiling. Yesterday, the President announced that, or it was announced by the President's spokesman, that they would consider this short-term increase. So it's really hard to tell what they're thinking at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and a lot of the times it depends on which way the wind is blowing. Now, White House officials aren't the only ones who think it's better to not propose a plan. In fact, a story in Roll Call newspaper yesterday said that one of my colleagues, the senior senator from New York, warned the Democrats to not release a plan. The article even said that they told the budget chairman not to propose a budget because it would just give others around the country something to shoot at. We've been here over 800 days since there's been a budget passed through the Senate, and a senator tells the chairman of the Budget Committee, don't let them see the budget. According to this article, however, it said that although he thought it was more politically helpful to spend time, quote, attacking corporate jet owners and defending entitlements. Mr. President, our entitlements are going to be bankrupt in just over 10 years, and some folks don't want to produce a plan to save them or to strengthen them. That's what we're hearing on the floor of the Senate. People often try to figure out how really large is this debt that we have. Well, we spend more on interest on our debt, just interest on our debt each and every day, more than it would cost to buy several hundred corporate jets every day that the Democrat senator from New York, the senior senator, is railing against. That's just the interest alone on the debt. That's what kind of money we owe. This isn't the kind of leadership that America needs right now. Even though the White House and my friends on the other side of the aisle continue to send different signals each day, Republicans remain committed to cutting spending. In fact, we put forward the only plan that has passed either house of Congress. It's called Cut, Cap, and Balance. It'll cut spending. It will cut the spending that we have, that American people realize we cannot live kind of continuing to spend money that we don't have. It will cap future spending, and it will require Washington to balance its budget. The state of Wyoming balances its budget every year. Every other alternative in this Congress, on the Hill, all around town, every other alternative is either undefined or unfinished or only speculative. So, Mr. President, I am pleased that the Senate will soon have a chance to vote on cut and cap and balance. It's a plan that's good for our country, and it's common sense. When Washington is $14 trillion in debt, we must cut the spending. When Washington borrows $4 billion a day, we must cap future spending. And when Washington borrows $2 million every single minute, we must learn to balance our budget. Americans understand that our country can't continue down this same track. We can't continue to spend money we don't have. Cut and cap and balance is the best plan for America. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, these are challenging, indeed daunting times, and while we're coming out of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, with continued high unemployment, our economy still remains extraordinarily fragile. And the fragility is not simply a macroeconomic phenomenon. It affects every family in this country who are worried about their employment, worrying about the future of their children, worrying about whether their parents will still enjoy adequate coverage under Medicare, will still be able to draw some sustenance from Social Security checks. All these worries are the daily lot of all Americans, and we have to respond to it. The most salient factor that affects most Americans is the dramatic loss of employment beginning in 2007, 2008, as the financial crisis engulfs this country. The United States economy has lost about 8.7 million private sector jobs just in 2008 and 2009 alone. These were times when a Republican president was continuing to accumulate huge deficit spending, most of it initiating and beginning with tax cuts, which my Republican colleagues supported enthusiastically, 2 wars that were not paid for, which were supported overwhelmingly by my Republican colleagues, entitlement expansion of Part D of Medicare, which, again, supported. And at no time did I hear the kind of outcry about growing deficits that we're hearing today. We all understand that after the 10 years of this decade, 8 of which were under the presidency of George W. Bush, we were in a very difficult deficit position. That position is made worse because our economy is not generating jobs. And one of the aspects of all these so-called plans, the cut, balance, whatever plan, and all the rest, is this fundamental question. How is it going to help us grow our economy and grow jobs in Rhode Island, in Vermont, in Wyoming? That seems to elude all of the proponents of these plans at the moment. We have seen, since the President Obama has taken office, some growth in employment. 16 consecutive months of private sector job growth, about 2.1 million jobs, in sharp contrast to what was happening under President Bush in the last 2 years of his administration. But we've got a long, long way to go. And indeed, we have a long, long way to go to make up for the surplus which President Bush and the Republican Congress inherited in 2001 and the deficit and economic destruction that President Obama inherited when he took office as President of the United States. Our most immediate and pressing business is try to reach some principled compromise on raising the debt ceiling. But instead of doing that, something that was done, I must say, rather routinely under President Bush about 8 times, even though Democrats, we had very serious disagreements with him. Disagreements on his tax policy, disagreements on a tax policy that was increasing the deficit, disagreement on wars, which were increasing the deficit, as well as distorting our strategy internationally. but at no time did we try to use the debt ceiling as the ultimate apocalyptic weapon to bring the president, and perhaps in doing so, even the country down. But I hear too many of my colleagues talking in those terms on the other side, particularly in the other chamber. Now, the bill that has been passed in the House is an attempt to shrink government, protect the wealthy and special interests in the tax code. It ties a debt ceiling increase to passage of a constitutional amendment that would require 38 states for ratification. Once again, we are taking what was routinely done and necessary so that we don't default on our credit and making it the vehicle for altering the Constitution of the United States, of building in even additional protections in the tax code for our wealthiest citizens. Now, this approach they're taking will, I think, needlessly jeopardize Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, while it enshrines in the Constitution further protections for loopholes in our tax code and the tax benefits that many of the wealthy and large corporations enjoy today. At the heart of what they're trying to propose in the House, and they've sent to us, is it to make it easier to cut these vital programs, a range of programs that involve transportation security agents at our airports, that can involve the flight controllers in the towers, can involve the distribution of indeed, agriculture programs, which affect large parts of this country, not so much my state, but large parts of this country. All of that would be subject to the kind of calculation of cutting, while it would be extraordinarily difficult to raise revenues. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think that's what the American people want. What I've seen from the polling is a huge number of Americans who are frankly saying, you know, the wealthiest in this country are enjoying huge tax benefits. 80%, I believe, of the American public are saying, you know, the first step we should do in balance the budget is to raise the taxes up on the wealthiest Americans. That's what they're saying. They're not saying cut benefits from people who are on the margin, who are struggling, working poor, who may be just under the line or over the line to qualify for Medicaid benefits in a state, health care for their children. I think the American people are smarter and more decent than some of the proposals that are being surfaced around here. Now, again, the caps on spending, they're all dressed up as sort of have no real effect on the important programs, but they'll affect on every program, including Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. And for people who are still struggling to find work, who are still struggling to find some type of traction in a difficult economy, these cuts can be devastating. And indeed, one of the challenges we have to generate our economy again is growth. And when we pull back from spending in the economy, that'll further accelerate, I think, the lack of demand and the lack of any incentive for private hiring. We're already seeing companies cut back. And why are they saying this? No demand. People aren't buying. People are saving. And if they sense, not sense, but they know they have to save more because they're not quite sure whether they'll get all their Social Security check or their Medicare benefits or any other benefits, well, that's just going to drive demand further down and slow the economy further down. Now, the Republican plan includes overall spending caps that reach 19.9% of GDP starting in 2017. But we have to look at this number in historical perspective. Over the past 40 years, this rate of spending is not only lower than the average spending, but moreover, outlays as a percentage of gross domestic product have only declined to 19.9% or lower when unemployment has been 6% or below. That makes sense. When the American economy is working, people don't collect a lot of benefits. They have a job. They don't need the kind of assistance they need today. And this cap of 19.9% is totally out of the a context when it comes to the present unemployment rate of 9% and, frankly, perhaps an even larger unemployment rate if this program is enacted. Again, I don't think this makes sense in terms of the simple mathematics or the history or the underlying policies that it would inevitably produce in the country. And yet we're still, in this Republican proposal, protecting the most special interest in this country, big oil and corporations. Those tax breaks, those tax perks, they're still there, and they'll continue to be there. Now, we all recognize we've got to make tough decisions about spending and about revenues. What I find acutely ironic is Democrats did that in 1993 and 1994. And that we heard about it for years and years later by Republicans assailing us. Of course, by 2000, we had a surplus. We had an economy that had an unemployment rate much closer to 5% than 10%. And all of that hard work, without any assistance by the Republicans, was completely squandered beginning in January 2001. And now we're back to the same challenge that we faced in 93 and 94. And we did it by making tough decisions. We did it over several years. We did it by trying to balance both cutting expenditures and increasing appropriate revenue. And also by recognizing that working Americans need the assistance and support of their government. And we can do it again. And I hope we do. But the first challenge, the one that has to be met, is to raise the debt ceiling. Defaulting on our debt would have catastrophic consequences. As we approach this deadline, the mere fact that we haven't done anything yet is prompting credit agencies to suggest that they will downgrade our rating. And one of the most salient figures, which I have heard in this debate, is that for every increase of 1% in our cost of credit, in the interest we much pay to borrow, over 10 years we'll add $1.3 trillion to our deficits. The longer we avoid raising the debt ceiling, the closer we come to actually accelerating the deficit dramatically by increasing the rate that we have to pay to borrow funds. And the other point I make, and the final point, this is not for new spending we have to borrow money. This is for the accumulation of the deficit that began dramatically in January 2001. And so I would urge my colleagues to move promptly and responsibly to raise the debt ceiling and then to get on the hard, difficult work, not of some magic plan that is produced overnight, but the long, difficult, hard work of balancing our budget as we did as Democrats in the 1990s, and then later in 1996-97 with a Republican Congress further added to the deficit reduction under the leadership of President Clinton. With that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Senator from Alabama.
I would ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, one of the things that frustrates the American people about Washington is how hard it is to get reliable information and straightforward answers. We in the Senate and Congress have that same difficulty. It is hard to know sometimes what numbers and statements and plans really mean and what they will cost. Politicians offer a budget proposal and they say it cuts taxes even though taxes go up. They even come up with new names to disguise tax hikes. Maybe they call them deficit cuts. That's been used. Revenue enhancements, pretty common. Revenue enhancements. Or reduced spending in the tax code. Reduced spending in the tax code. Doesn't mean eliminating the earned income tax credit. It usually means some deduction somebody's allowed to take, and that's been renamed as spending. We hear people come to the floor and blame our massive deficit on anything and everything but our out-of-control spending. Well, it's in the war in Iraq, or it's a tax cut passed a decade ago, or it's special preferences for private yachts or Lear jets. We can't have an honest budget if we really can't talk honestly and factually about it, and I hope to be able to contribute in some way to clarifying the issues. I do my best today to plainly state some of the things I think that are plainly true. First, I would like to address the myth that the President has a $4 trillion deficit reduction plan. That's been talked about a bit. It seems to be belief that the President has a plan to reduce spending by $4 trillion. But the only plan that the President has put on paper and allowed anybody to see is his February budget, which doubles the national debt. The President has never put a single spending cut plan on paper that actually reduces spending, and he has no program that would reduce substantially the deficit. If he does, it's a closely guarded secret. His budget that he submitted earlier this year increases taxes significantly, but it increased spending more. By the Congressional Budget Office analysis, it would increase the deficit more over the next 10 years than if the budget were not passed at all. Indeed, it would increase the gross debt of the United States by $13 trillion, doubling the entire debt of the United States again in the next 10 years. And if there's a secret plan that does exist somewhere, it should be made public this afternoon. Let's see it. I'd like to. I think millions of Americans would feel the same way. Summaries just don't work. The President summarized his budget that I just described as calling on Americans to live within our means and will not add more to the debt. Now, that sounds pretty good because this year our deficit is projected to be $1,500 billion. So we'd like to be living within our means again. We'd like to not add more to the debt, but even by their own analysis, the plan didn't do it. And the Congressional Budget Office, our independent group, analyzed the President's budget and found that in 10 years, the lowest single annual deficit that would occur would be $740 billion. The highest budget deficit President Bush had was $450. The lowest that would be accrued would be $740 billion. And it goes up in the out years until it goes over $1 trillion, over $1,000 billion in the 10th year of his budget. How can that be? Live within your means. Will not add more to the debt. And every single year we would be adding to the debt. So we can't deal with summaries and spin statements about a plan until that plan has been put in legislative language and scored. we also have received no plan from my Senate Democratic colleagues. For a time there, a couple of months ago, the Democrats were on the path to producing a budget in the Budget Committee as required by statutory law. I, as ranking Republican, was very anxious to see it, and we were told we would get it the morning of the hearing, not a bit sooner. And so I grumbled about that. I'd like to have a little more time to see it, but it never happened. I think that the majority leader, not our committee chairman, decided, the Democratic leadership decided, that they didn't want to have a budget. One of their committee folks said he'd put a target on your back. Senator Reid said it'd be foolish to have a budget. Why would it be foolish to have a budget? Well, you can't say your budget calls on you to live within your means if you actually put it out there. People can score it and find out whether that's true or not. So we hadn't had a budget in this Senate in 813 days. As of now, there is only one debt limit plan on paper, only one plan available for public scrutiny and review, and that's the one we're considering today. Cut, cap, and balance. It cuts spending immediately, it caps it so it won't go up, and it requires the passage of a balanced budget amendment to ensure that Washington ends deficit spending once and for all. The American people do not support a Washington plan to pass some grand deal with tax hikes that never go away and with spending cuts that are talked about but never really materialize. So they're wise, I think, to the gimmicks and accounting of Washington. They are not happy with us. At this very moment, the people's representatives in Congress have presided over a financial condition of this country where 40% of every dollar this government spends is borrowed. Well, these are Tea Party people. You know, they're angry. They're not good people. They're angry people. Why shouldn't they be angry when this kind of leadership has occurred in the Congress of the United States of America? It is utterly, totally indefensible. It should never, ever have happened. Yet it has. It threatens our financial future. It threatens our economy and our economic growth. So the American people are not happy about it. So that's why I introduced a piece of legislation that would require 7 days to review any bill that would increase the debt limit, because this is going to be complex. People want to bring it up at the 11th hour under a panic mode. If we don't pass it tomorrow, the world markets are going to be destabilized. Interest could go up. And I don't know, some of those things could happen. We ought to do it before the last minute. We absolutely should do something to avoid this deadline. But we ought to not wait till the last minute and have plopped down in the United States Senate some big complex bill that's got to be passed before the sun rises the next day, and nobody has time to analyze it or score it to find out what it really means. But our Washington Democratic colleagues are resisting the cut, cap, and balance bill because there's no gimmick in it. There's no accounting a trick to get around if this becomes law. They know it will work. And for the big spenders, the only thing you don't want to pass is a piece of legislation that will work to contain spending. Because, you see, they want to spend more. And they think if they continue to spend more, then they can go and demand you raise taxes to pay for it. Washington is going to have to end this spending spree. There are these kind of difficult choices are the responsible choices families, cities, states, county commissions are making every day, every year. In Alabama, Governor Robert Bentley oversaw an across-the-board cut of 15% from the general fund in the current year because of a constitutional prohibition on deficit spending. Alabama's not going to run up a debt. And for next year, he's taken a cautious approach. Hopefully we'll have more revenue, but he is cautiously approaching next year, and he's proposed cuts of up to 45% for some agencies that could he felt would be appropriate places to reduce spending. Those are tough choices. But unlike that, the federal government is not required to live within our means. Another myth I'd like to address is the idea that our current budget crisis is a result of 2 wars and a tax cut. Now, we've heard that over and over again. And the wars cost money, a good bit of money. Over the entire decade, the cost of Afghanistan and Iraq wars is about $1.3 trillion. And that is a lot of money. Again, that's over 10 years, over a decade. This year alone, the deficit is expected to be $1,400 billion, $1.4 trillion. The deficit this year will be larger than the cost of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars over 10 years. So the driving force behind our deficit is not the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's just not. War costs represent only 4% of total outlays over the last 10 years. The total amount of money spent since President Obama took office is $8.5 trillion. By the end of his first 3 years in office, we will have added $5 trillion to our gross federal debt. It's a stunning numbers. As I said, President Bush had a widely criticized, in many ways rightly criticized, $450 billion deficit. Since President Obama's been in office, the deficits have been 1.2, 1.3. It looks like this year will be $1.5 trillion. Each year, more than double that amount. We are borrowing too close to half of what we're spending every single day. In the last 2 years, discretionary spending, non-defense discretionary spending in the last 2 years increased 24%. 12% a year on average. These are our discretionary spending. This isn't Social Security and Medicare, which increased far less than that. Maybe half of that, they do increase. The stimulus package alone, added into law in a single day in 2009, we passed it on this floor over my objection. That stimulus package, every penny of which was borrowed. We were in debt, but they said the economy needs to be stimulated. We're going to spend $850 or so billion. That one stimulus package passed in the largest expenditure bill in the history of the American Republic cost more than the entire war in Iraq has cost. The spending when President Bush took office was less than $2 trillion. Today it's almost $4 trillion. It will be almost $6 trillion by the end of the decade. There is only one honest answer to the question over why our debt is rising so fast, and that is out of control domestic spending. Another myth that's circulating, which I'd like to address, concerns the outline from our colleagues and friends who participated and worked hard on the Gang of Six proposal. And I give them a lot of credit and respect for the hard work they put into it. I wish it had been produced a month ago so we could have actually had legislative language and know what it would really mean today. The authors of their summary, though, that they just produced for us, claim that the approach would reduce the deficit by $3.7 trillion, which maybe is a third of so of the deficit we're projected to see in the next 10 years. But my staff on the Budget Committee, taking the summary pages that they produced for us, can only find $1.2 trillion in reduced spending in that outline, along with what's pretty clear, very clear, a $1 trillion tax increase. Well, where does the other $1.5 trillion in deficit reduction claimed in the outline come from? Chairman Conrad, one of the members of the Gang of Six and our chairman on the Budget Committee, a man I respect and have enjoyed working with, says, even says the outline has a $1.5 trillion tax cut. But this is compared, see, this is how these numbers get bandied about. It's compared against a baseline which assumes more than $3.5 trillion in tax increases would occur. So he's only going to increase taxes, I guess, $2 trillion, I don't know, and you get a savings by not having them go up as much. But based on the current tax rates that are in existence in America today, as we read their outline, and I think they would agree, it increases taxes by $1 trillion over 10 years. That's a large amount. The real cost of the tax changes, some say, who've looked at these numbers, not $1 trillion, but $2 trillion. So that remains to be seen. We'll get, hopefully, legislative language that can actually be analyzed, and we would know how much taxes would actually go up. The last myth I'd like to address is perhaps the most important of all, and this is the myth that we only need about $2 trillion in actual spending cuts over the next 10 years. And that's basically been what our colleagues are saying. Well, they float the idea of $4 trillion in savings. What they mean is you save $2 trillion by reducing spending, and you increase taxes $2 trillion. And you've saved $4 billion over 10 years. I'm not sure that's what the American people are expecting of us when we say we're saving money. By taking it from them, it's not saving the American people more. It's not saving the private economy more to take another $2 trillion from them. There's no free lunch. Somebody pays. Our Democrat colleagues have said, although no plan has ever been made public to this effect, that they could get behind a budget deal that reduces the deficit $4 trillion over the next 10 years, half of it comprised of spending cuts. Well, this is not even close, frankly, to what is needed to ultimately balance our budget. We are projected to spend $46 trillion over the next 10 years. A $2 trillion reduction in spending is only about 4% reduction in spending that's set to increase by almost 60%. Remember, we'll say, we're reducing spending. Not reducing spending, reducing the rate of growth in spending by $2 trillion on a $46 trillion plan. Think about it. I'm not talking about reducing spending. This budget would have the expenditures go up significantly in the next 10 years to $46 trillion. The $2 trillion would be a growth, reducing in growth. And $2 trillion of tax increases would mean we'd spend the same $46 trillion. We just wouldn't have, we would borrow $2 trillion less because we extracted more from the American people. In just a little over 2 months, our debt will reach 100% of our economy, 100% of GDP. That's the gross debt. That would match the size of our economy. It costs us 1 million jobs or more a year when that occurs. We have the Rogoff-Reinhardt study. Secretary Geithner said it's an excellent study. He said in some ways it understates the problem we have. Secretary Geithner knows debt is a real problem for America. Their study shows that when your debt reaches as large as ours, it starts pulling down economic growth. We expected 3% growth first quarter. Came in at 1.8. Could that be because we've crossed the 90% threshold already in debt to GDP, and that debt becomes a burden on the economy and reduces growth? This quarter's growth is going to be lower. The experts are downgrading the projected growth for the third and fourth quarters of this fiscal year, this calendar year. It's a very serious thing. And Christine Romer, who used to be in President Obama's White House on economic matters, said 1% growth means you'll add 1 million jobs. So if we lose them and we come in at 2% growth instead of 3%, we failed to add 1 million jobs we could have added. And the debt, I truly believe, is the reason that we're having surprisingly low growth rates, below projected rates. Maybe I'm wrong, but we certainly have a study that seems to say that exactly, and it's been widely praised by economists all over the country. The honest truth is that this president and his Democratic Senate are not going to agree to the level of spending cuts in a debt deal that's necessary to put our country on a sound path. I think that's a fact. We've been negotiating and talking all year. The House laid out a budget plan. The Senate has refused. 800-plus days without a budget. They are determined not to reduce spending after increasing domestic spending, non-defense, by 24%. They say they'll freeze spending. Freeze spending at levels that have jumped 24%. We don't have the money. We're borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar we spend. This is unfortunately, we got a battle over the vision for the future of America. It's a big government vision that a lot of our members have, and they're going to work as hard as they possibly can to preserve that vision, preserve that spending. And after running up this huge debt by 24% baseline increase, that does not count the stimulus package of almost $900 billion that's thrown on top of that. Run up all this debt, and now they want to go to the American people and say, we're not going to cut spending. You have got to pay more in taxes. I don't think that's what the American people want, so we've got a national debate here. It's the great debate of our time. It's not going to be settled in 2 weeks. A few people are not going to meet in secret and work out some grand and glorious deal. Wish they could, but I don't think they are. I'll be pleased if they do. I'm confident that the good sense and wisdom of the American people ultimately are going to prevail. I'm confident we will eventually get our spending under control. We will restore the American principles of limited government and build a better, freer future for our children, raise the debt limit so we don't have that kind of problem, and put this country on a sound path. If we get our debt under control, I think this growth will jump. And I believe we'll see the progress that we've always seen in this great, productive, dynamic country. I thank the Chair and will yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have reached a point in this country's history that I never thought that I would ever see, which is the major credit ratings agencies have all said that our credit rating is in jeopardy and that the United States may face a downgrade of its debt. Now, Mr. President, you and I both have had our issues with the credit rating agencies who failed to predict the crisis that we were driven into by very, very poor business decisions. I can't even really call them business decisions, horrible decisions that were made that drove our economy off a cliff, both here and in our financial markets, both in Washington, among our politicians, and among people that securitized debt, sold it off, and took no responsibility for it. But having said all of that, I don't think these agencies have any political incentive other than to shoot straight on this question of the condition of our debt. One of the greatest assets that we have always had as a country is the steadiness of our credit. Countries and investors all over the world use it to finance transactions that otherwise would be difficult to do because we have a AAA rating on our debt. And now we're facing a downgrade because we can't even have an adult conversation, a polite conversation here about a path forward. People should be very clear about what this means. This is not just a Washington problem. If we blow through our credit rating, and if our interest rates rise by 1 percentage point, just 1 percentage point, that's going to add $1.3 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. If it goes up 2 percentage points, that's $2.6 trillion added to the debt over the next 10 years, which means we will continue to pay our borrowers interest and we will continue to underinvest in the children of this country, in our infrastructure, in our research and development, in all the things that will allow us to compete in the 21st century. And for what? Just to pay higher interest rates to people because we couldn't come to an agreement here in Washington. I've spent the last 2.5 years traveling around the great state of Colorado, a state that's complicated politically, which I enjoy because we're a third Republican, we're a third Democratic, and we're a third independent. And if I had to boil down the essence of what I've heard from people in my state about what they want us to be doing here, is they would want us to approach this question the same way they would approach this question. They want us to materially address the problem that we have. They want a material solution to it. They know we can't fix this overnight, a $1.5 trillion budget deficit and a $15 trillion debt, but they want us to fix it. They want to know that we're all in it to play to solve a problem that's too big for any one of us to solve or any group of us to solve. They want it to be bipartisan because they have no confidence in my state in either party's go-it-alone approach. And I would add a corollary to all of that, which is that we need to satisfy the capital markets that the paper that they've bought is actually worth what they've paid for it, and that the United States of America is going to stand behind that paper and going to be able to stand behind the paper. And this is one of the reasons that I have supported an approach that the Gang of Six has brought forward, because it meets that test. It may not be perfect in all respects, and I know there can be disagreement about it, but that's one of the reasons that I've supported it. It's bipartisan. It's a measured approach. And I can't say the same for the bill that we're considering today. And among other things, even if you thought this was a good idea, even the proponents of the legislation say it would take 10 years before this constitutional amendment would take effect. And what we need to be doing over the next 10 years is figuring out how to get our fiscal house in order. I have other issues with it as well, but I think the point that I really want to make today is that we need to work together in a bipartisan way to create a measured approach. And you know what else? We can't declare victory then, even when we're able to say to the credit markets, you know what, we've headed off disaster. That didn't used to be our standard as Americans. The presiding officer, I know, I've heard him on the floor many times talk about the state of the American economy, and I agree with him in his diagnosis. If I had to pick one fact over the last 10 years from our economic life, and I see the senator from Oklahoma is here, and I'll wrap up in 1 minute, that worries me the most, it's that median family income has fallen over the last 10 years for the first time in this country's history. Stagnated for a while before that, fallen for the first 10 years. Average family income went up, by the way, over that period of time. Median family income has fallen. The cost of higher education has skyrocketed. The cost of health care has skyrocketed. And it is harder and harder for the middle class to get ahead. Our economic production in this country today is roughly the same as it was before we went into this recession. But we have 14 million fewer people doing the work because they're unemployed. And we need to have a set of tax policies and regulatory policies that are driving innovation in this economy, have an energy policy that's creating energy independence, and make sure that we're fiscally responsible. I want to, before I leave the floor, thank the senator from Oklahoma who's here today. He and I probably don't agree on most things, disagree about a lot of things, but I want to thank him and the other members of the Gang of Six for the work that they have done. I want to thank him and Dick Durbin in particular, one of the more liberal members of the Senate, for voting for the deficit and debt recommendations that were made by the bipartisan commission that was appointed on the deficit and the debt. It took real courage for him to do that. It took real courage for Dick Durbin to do that. And it's going to take real courage. It's going to take real courage for the 100 members of this body and for the members of the other body to produce a plan to address this fiscal problem that no one would agree with every single aspect of, but that we can come together and agree is worthy of the aspirations that we have for our kids and our grandkids. Time is very, very short. And if we trip over this debt ceiling, and if we fail to uphold the full faith and credit of the United States, no one's going to be asking any one of us what pledge we made about this or what pledge we made about that. They're simply going to observe that when we were one of 100 Americans out of over 300 million Americans, we let the unthinkable happen to this country. Mr. President, thank you for allowing me to speak, and I yield the floor.